Fellow Christians, we hunger to know who Jesus is. We are his students, his followers after all, but if we don't know who Jesus is, we don't know who it is we are following, and we can easily recite the creeds that say Jesus is both true God and true man, but still in our minds, we can't get around that seemingly impossible reality. And so to solve that problem of what we believe, what we say, and what we understand, we are tempted to make Jesus into someone more recognizable. And I wonder if it could ever happen in our efforts to know him that we shrink him down to some sort of superhero that we know in popular culture. The baseline core revelation about Jesus is that he is true God and true man, that he is both simultaneously without confusion, separation, or division, to use the words of an early church document. But even as we say those words about the seemingly impossible proposition that Jesus is one divine person with two natures, human and divine, 1,000 questions surface. And among these, immediately we might ask, was Jesus truly God? Or was he truly human? Or did he just appear to be God? Or did he just appear to be human? And if he had two natures, did he have two wills? Or did the divine will not overpower and swamp the human? And if he had two natures, didn't the divine nature really dominate? Or if not two natures, then really just one, the divine nature, or was it just the human? To begin to explore this topic, I want to pick out a few heresies that remain of interest to us because they linger or because they are superficially attractive. And maybe that is that these heresies linger or resurface because there is often something understandable about them. As someone once said, it's not that heresies have everything wrong, it's that they have only part of the truth, and it's that contact with the truth that gives them power. And as a sign of that power, we have been talking about these heresies for thousands of years, since the earliest days of the church. And to enter into these heresies, I want to illustrate them by imagining how Jesus' identity is distorted into some modern superheroes. Now here's the first, Nestorianism. And the modern figure might be, say, the Hulk, that big green guy, or Gollum. Not that he's a superhero, but Gollum from The Lord of the Rings. He comes to mind in connection with this heresy. And we can date this heresy, Nestorianism, to the 5th century. And this heresy sees Jesus as having two divided natures in one being. It's as if Jesus, the man, had within him somehow the second person of the Trinity. And these natures are not united in any sense. One nature will act out and supersede the other at a moment's notice, like we see with Hulk or Gollum. Nestorianism is not consistent with the earlier Council of Chalcedon, which I'll get to in a second. But if Jesus is like the Hulk or Gollum, what does this say about Jesus as true God, true man? That is, it's that he's only God or man intermittently or sporadically? Think about what this heresy means in terms of Jesus' ability to be one with us. Well, if Nestorianism is true, then clearly Jesus is not like us, because we are not like the Hulk or Gollum. Now, this council I mentioned a bit ago, the Council of Chalcedon, it is dated to 451 AD, and it declared regarding Jesus' two natures that the Christian faith is as follows. The council says, "We teach that he is, Jesus is perfect in godhood, perfect in manhood, truly God and truly man, of a reasonable soul and body, of the same substance with the Father in Godhead, and the same substance with us in manhood, acknowledged in two natures, and here's key, without confusion, without change, without division, without separation. Now here in this conversation, there's a technical term that would be good to know. It's homoousios. It's a Greek word that means of the same substance. Homo, same, ousios, substance. Thus, if we were to speak in the technical language of Chalcedon, Jesus is homoousios, same substance with the Father and with us humans, the same substance. Now, Chalcedon and the other ecumenical councils, especially the first 7, dealt with, among other matters, these Christological controversies about who is Christ. They all met in what is modern-day Turkey, and they range from the First Council of Nicaea, maybe you remember that, from the Nicene Creed. That was in 325, going up to the Second Council of Nicaea in 787, and there's 5 others intervening between those two bookends. Well, if Jesus is not like the Hulk or Gollum, two natures that are unstable, how about if we think that Jesus is like Superman? Now, arising in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, we have the heresy of Docetism. Or, as I say, Jesus is understood to be like Superman, who looks like a human but really isn't. He only appeared to be so. And the Greek word here is dokein. And from dokein we get docetism. Thus, Jesus only imitated being a human. And there's a couple of variations here in this heresy. One is that Jesus is a ghost, a phantasm. He's so divine that he couldn't be human. He just appears as a ghost from time to time. Another variation is that Jesus is merely acting out being a human. He's here, but he's not human. He's really only God. Now, in doing this, you'll notice that this heresy avoids what was an embarrassment to perhaps Greek-inspired philosophy of the era, where we disdain the flesh, the material. It's unworthy or maybe even sinful. But if we do that, if we disdain the flesh, instead of saying the word became flesh, it's as if we were to say the good became evil. And that's not what we believe. And Docetism ignores this wonderful maxim of St. Gregory Nazianzus, who reminds us that what is not assumed is not redeemed. If Jesus did not assume our flesh, is our flesh then redeemed? Gregory would say no. So is this Docetism heresy current today? Well, this overemphasis on the divine nature of Jesus is so much so that we ignore his human nature. Yeah, it lingers. Consider what happens when we overread and misunderstand John's gospel. And we do this in a way that we minimize the humanity of Jesus. When we think that Jesus is elevated to a solely or mostly divine nature and without human nature, when we think that way, we can be said to be naive Docetists. Here's a third big heresy, Arianism. Here, think Batman. Arius of Alexandria in the 4th century is the proponent. And not that he was a Batman fan and proponent, but, well, you know what I mean. Arius is the father of Arianism. Now, Arius knew God to be unchangeable, immutable from all of eternity. But then he begins to think about the Son being born of the Father, and then thought that the Son is a creature with a beginning, that Jesus is not eternally begotten of the Father, Arius is thinking. And so, to Arius's mind, there's a space between Father and Son. But That's not what we believe. We say that Jesus is, in the words of the Creed, consubstantial with the Father, of the same substance. Remember that word homoousios. Well, if Father and Son are co-eternal as well as one in being, then they are, if you will, equal. There is no space between the two of them. And that Nicene Creed that we recite at Mass is anti-Arian. We say, I believe in one Lord Jesus Christ, the only begotten, not born, begotten Son of God, born of the Father before all ages, God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made, consubstantial, homoousios with the Father. Through him all things were made. Now, none of us want to admit that we are heretics. It's such an ugly word, but for some context as to how prevalent this Arian heresy is, the claim is made by some surveys that many Americans who attend religious services of any kind view Jesus not as eternal, but as the greatest creature ever made by God. In one survey, I saw a claim that about half of the people in attendance at any Christian Sunday service across a variety of denominations were really Arians. That Jesus, in their minds, is the greatest man ever, but he's not God. It makes me think that they would sing along with that tune from the Byrds. Remember them, a 1960s group? They had a song with the lyric, Jesus is just all right. Jesus is cool like Batman. That's Arianism. Here's heresy number 4. Maybe its name is less well known than the first 3 heresies, but still, what this heresy holds is not unknown to the modern world. And now I'm speaking of the heresy of monophysitism. Monophysites or monophysites, one physic, one nature. It originates in the 5th century. And, if you will, the superhero reduction of Jesus might be Aquaman, a hero whose human-like appearance conceals his power and origin as a child of some god of Atlantis. Now, Aquaman kind of looks human, but he's really not. Aquaman fills the bill of being of one nature, but that nature is not human. And the heresy of monophysitism asserts that Jesus has only one nature, and that nature is divine, not human. Monophysitism is, as I say, one physis, one physis, one nature. Now, the thinking was that this was a way to counteract Nestorianism. Monophysitism gives Jesus the characteristics of 2 natures, but avoids the problem of the unstable relationship between the 2 natures, as we see with the thinking of changing Jesus into something like that of the Hulk or Gollum. Monophysites say that since Jesus has these human and divine dimensions to himself, not natures, but dimensions, if it's impossible to have 2 fully different natures, then we have to see Jesus as having only one nature, and that's going to be the divine. The Monophysites chose the divine nature. But in any event, that's not true God and true man. And we come now to heresy number 5, monothelites, or do you say monothelite? 7th century origins. Maybe we can bring out Superman again. Monothelitism, mono, one, thelitism, one will. This is a solution to the problem of having 2 natures, human and divine. And if you've got two natures, well, how do those natures decide what to do or what to think? Well, the Monothelites thought that they'd solve this problem, and they went the route of holding that Jesus had only one will, and that was the divine will. So with the Superman idea, Superman, as a Monothelite, relies on his mind from the planet Krypton. Jesus would rely on his heavenly, divine, unearthly will. The idea is that one divine will is a way of acknowledging two natures in Jesus. Yes, two natures. The thinking is he's got human and divine natures, but it was the divine will that runs the show. Then we can accept Jesus and having two natures. Kinda. But a big problem, because having a will is an essential part of a nature. How can I be human if I have no will? So without two wills, Jesus can't really be said to have two natures. So what do we say as a consequence of thinking about these 5 different heresies? Jesus as the Hulk or Gollum, as Superman or Batman or Aquaman. Now, there are many more heresies and more superheroes that we could enlist, but what all these and the other heresies grapple with is how to understand the Son of God, the second person of the Trinity, how he became man, lived among us, showed us how to live, and died and rose and redeemed us. Despite the enormity and depth of the mystery, it doesn't serve us well to minimize it just so that we can shrink Jesus down to something we can handle, down to someone, frankly, he is not. Rather, our relationship as disciples with the one who is our teacher, the one whom we want to know, calls for us to reverently kneel and ask for a lifetime of exploring who Jesus is. He is no superhero. He is infinitely bigger than that. Our journey with the help of God is to discover just how big.